The invitation arrived on a quiet evening, tucked between bills and promotional emails that meant nothing. Her name in bold at the top stopped everything. It had been years. Years since she walked away. Years since she chose a different life, a different future, one that didn't include me. And now, suddenly, she wanted me there. Her engagement party. At first, it felt like a mistake. But it wasn't. The message was clear, almost too polished. A formal tone, carefully written, but beneath it was something colder, something deliberate. She wanted me to come. She wanted me to see. And more than that, she wanted others to see me. I leaned back, staring at the screen longer than I should have. Old memories began surfacing, uninvited, the late-night conversations, the promises we made when we had nothing, the way she used to say my name like it meant something. Back then, I wasn't anyone special, just a man with big dreams and empty pockets. And to her, that eventually became a problem. She didn't leave suddenly. It was slow, almost strategic. First came the complaints, then the comparisons, then the silence, until one day, she simply chose someone else, someone established, someone wealthy, someone who already had everything I was still working for. I remember the last thing she told me. You're not enough, not for the life I want. Simple words, but they stayed. For a long time, they defined everything. I closed the message. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, deleting it, pretending it never arrived. That would have been easier, but something about it didn't sit right. This wasn't just an invitation. It was a stage, and I was being called back to play a role. The question was which one? The failure? The past mistake? The man she once settled for? A faint smile appeared on my face. If she wanted a show, she was going to get one, just not the one she expected. The next few days passed quietly. No dramatic preparations. No emotional breakdowns. Just calm, calculated decisions. Because the truth was, my life had changed. Not overnight. Not magically. But steadily. Pain has a way of sharpening focus. And rejection, if you survive it, becomes fuel. I had built something. Something real. Something powerful. But I never talked about it. Never needed validation. Success, I learned, speaks best in silence. And that's exactly how I planned to arrive. The day of the party came with perfect weather. Golden sunlight stretched across the water as the city buzzed with energy. The venue she chose was exactly what I expected. Luxury, elegance, a place designed to impress. People like her fiancé lived in that world. Or at least, they want to be seen that way. I stood at the marina, watching the waves move gently against polished docks. And then, slowly my yacht came into view. $90 million of engineering, design, and presence. It didn't just float, it dominated. Every detail was intentional. Every line crafted to command attention without saying a word. I didn't rush. Timing matters, especially when silence is your loudest statement. Back at the venue, guests were already gathering. Champagne glasses clinked softly. Laughter echoed through curated conversations. Everything looked perfect, and she looked exactly how I remembered, only sharper, more refined, more calculated. She moved through the crowd effortlessly, greeting guests, smiling in that practiced way she always had. Then her eyes paused, just for a second, on the entrance, but I wasn't there yet, and somehow she knew I would be. Whispers started before I even stepped in, not because they saw me, but because they saw what arrived outside. The yacht, massive, unmissable. Guests near the windows began turning their heads. Phones came out. Curiosity spread like fire. Whose is that? Is someone important arriving? I didn't see that on the guest list. Confusion turned into anticipation. And then, I walked in. The room didn't react all at once. That's not how moments like this work. It started small. One person noticing. Then another, eyes narrowing, trying to recognize. And then it hit. The shift, the silence. Not complete silence, but enough. Enough for attention to gather. Enough for presence to be felt. I walked calmly. No rush, no hesitation. Not trying to prove anything. Because the truth was, I didn't need to. She saw me. This time there was no doubt. Her smile froze, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Enough to reveal everything she didn't want others to see. Shock, confusion, and something deeper, regret. Her fiancé stepped forward before she could react. Confident, polished, the kind of man who was used to control. "Hey," he said, extending his hand. "Glad you could make it." His tone was neutral, but his eyes were calculating. He didn't recognize me. Not yet, but he recognized the shift in the room, and he knew I was the reason. I shook his hand firmly. Wouldn't miss it. Simple, direct, and somehow heavier than expected. She approached next, slowly, carefully, as if stepping into something unpredictable. "I didn't think you'd actually come." Her voice was steady, but her eyes told a different story. I looked at her for a moment, then gave a small nod. "You invited me." That was it. No bitterness, no sarcasm, just truth. And somehow that made it worse. Around us, the energy had changed. People were watching, trying to piece together the story, trying to understand the tension they could feel, but not explain. And that's when it happened. One of her friends, someone who remembered me, laughed quietly, not loudly enough to cause a scene, but enough. "Well, this is unexpected," she said. "I didn't think you'd show up like this." Her eyes drifted toward the marina, toward the yacht, then back to me, and suddenly the realization spread, like a domino effect. Faces changed, expressions shifted. The whispers returned, only now they were different, not curious, respectful, almost cautious. Her fiancé noticed. Of course he did. People like him always notice shifts in power. He looked at me again, this time more carefully. "Wait, the yacht outside." I didn't answer immediately. Didn't need to, because by now the room already knew. And that's when everything changed. The silence didn't break all at once. It stretched, heavy, uncomfortable, unavoidable. Her fiancé's question still hung in the air, but the answer was already forming in everyone's mind. I glanced briefly toward the glass walls facing the marina. The yacht stood there like a quiet decoration. Then I looked back at him. "It's mine." No emphasis, no arrogance, just a fact. The reaction was instant, even if no one spoke. You could feel it. The shift from curiosity to recalculation. People who had ignored me moments ago were now paying attention. The same eyes that once dismissed were now studying, measuring, trying to understand what they had clearly underestimated. Her fiancé let out a short breath, almost like a laugh. "Impressive," he said. But this time, it wasn't casual. It was controlled, like someone adjusting to a new variable they hadn't accounted for. "Didn't realize we had someone like you on the guest list." I gave a slight shrug. "Neither did I." A few people nearby chuckled softly, not because the joke was funny, but because tension needs an exit, and that was the safest one available. She hadn't said anything, not since I confirmed it, but her silence spoke louder than anything else. She was looking at me differently now, not the way she used to, not the way she had expected to. This wasn't the version of me she remembered, and that unsettled her. "I thought you were still," she started, then stopped. The sentence didn't finish, but it didn't need to. Everyone understood what she meant. Still struggling, still behind, still less. I met her gaze calmly. "Still what?" She hesitated, and for the first time that night, she didn't have control of the conversation. "I just didn't know," she said finally. That was safer, vague enough to hide the truth. I nodded slightly. "That makes two of us." Another silence, but this one felt different, sharper, because now the power dynamic had flipped. Someone from across the room raised their voice slightly. "So, what do you do?" It sounded casual, but it wasn't. It was the question everyone wanted answered. Titles matter in rooms like this. Labels define worth. And without one, people get uncomfortable. I turned slightly toward the voice. "Investments." Short, simple, unclear on purpose, because the details weren't the point. "What kind of investments?" Another voice added quickly, more curious now. more engaged. I smiled faintly, the kind that work. A few more quiet laughs, but this time they carried respect, not mockery. Her fiancé crosses arms slightly, a subtle shift, protective, territorial. He stepped closer to her, without making it obvious. Must be doing pretty well, he said. Yachts like that don't come cheap. No, I replied. They don't. Eye contact held for a moment longer than necessary. Not aggressive, but not passive either. Just enough to establish something unspoken. And then she broke it. Why did you come? The question cut through everything else. Clear, direct, personal. Finally, I looked at her, really looked this time, at the person she had become, at the life she had chosen, at the moment she had tried to control. You invited me. I repeated, but this time there was more behind it. That's not why, she said quickly, a bit too quickly. You could have ignored it. I could have. Pause. Then, but I was curious. About what? She asked. I let the silence sit for just a second, long enough for attention to sharpen again. About why now? Her expression shifted again, not dramatically, but enough, because she didn't have a clean answer. It's just an invitation, she said, but even she didn't believe that. No, I replied quietly. It's not. Around us, conversations had slowed. People weren't pretending anymore. They were listening, watching, waiting. You wanted me to see something, I continued, and you wanted others to see me. Her jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, in exposure. That's not fair, she said. It's accurate. The honesty landed harder than anything else, because it wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. It was just true. Her fiancé stepped in again. This feels unnecessary, he said, voice firm. This is supposed to be a celebration. It is, I nodded, and I'm here for that. Then maybe we keep things positive, he added, a suggestion that felt like a boundary. Of course. Another pause, but now something had shifted again, not in my favor, not in theirs, just different, because the moment everyone expected, the humiliation, the imbalance, the quiet dismissal, it never happened. Instead, something far more uncomfortable had taken its place, uncertainty. And uncertainty makes people uneasy. One of the older guests, someone clearly experienced in reading rooms like this, stepped forward with a polite smile. Well, he said lightly, any friend of the bride is a friend of the evening. I looked at him, then back at her, then gave a small nod, something like that. But inside, I already knew something they didn't, something none of them had figured out yet. I hadn't just come to attend, and I hadn't just come to prove anything. I came because there was one detail in that invitation, one small detail. That didn't make sense. And I never ignore things that don't make sense, especially when they come from her. Because if there was one thing I learned from the past, it's that she never does anything without a reason. And tonight, this wasn't about humiliation. Not entirely. There was something else, something deeper, something hidden beneath all the elegance and performance. And I was about to find out what it was. The music picked back up, soft at first, carefully chosen, like everything else in the room. Conversations resumed, but not fully, not naturally, because something had changed, and no one could pretend otherwise. I stepped away from the center, not retreating, just observing. That's where the truth usually lives, not in what people say, but in how they move when they think no one is watching. From across the room, I could see her again, laughing, smiling, playing her role perfectly. But now that I knew what to look for, the cracks were obvious. The pauses were slightly too long. The smiles didn't always reach her eyes. And every few seconds, she glanced toward me. Interesting. I picked up a glass from a passing tray. Didn't drink it, just held it. Sometimes, looking occupied makes people underestimate how much you're actually noticing. Didn't expect you to steal the entire room like that. The voice came from behind me, calm, Amused, I turned slightly. It was the older man from earlier. Sharp suit, sharper eyes. The kind of person who didn't miss details. I didn't steal anything, I said. They were already looking for something to talk about. He smiled faintly. True, but you gave them something worth talking about. I didn't respond, just watched him for a moment. You're not just here for the party, he added. Not a question, a statement. No, I said, I'm not. His smile widened just slightly. Good. I was hoping I wasn't the only one who noticed something off. That got my attention. I turned fully toward him now. What do you mean? He glanced across the room, toward her, then toward her fiancé, then back to me. This isn't an engagement party, he said quietly. It's a performance. I let that sit, because he wasn't wrong. Performances have audiences, I replied, and purposes. Exactly. We stood in silence for a second, two observers in a room full of actors. Do you know him? I asked, nodding subtly toward her fiancé. Reputation only, he said. Good on paper. Fast success. Very polished. A pause. Too polished. That matched the feeling I had earlier. Something about him felt rehearsed, controlled, like every move had been calculated in advance. And her, he added, you knew her before all this. Yes. He studied my face carefully. Then you already know. She doesn't do anything without a reason. I exhaled slowly. That's what concerns me. Because now the question wasn't just why invite me. It was, what role was I supposed to play tonight? A sudden clink of glass pulled attention back to the center of the room. The fiancé had stepped forward, champagne flute raised, smile perfectly in place. Can I have everyone's attention for a moment? The room quieted again, faster this time. People were ready now, expecting something. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her slightly closer, a picture-perfect image. Tonight is special, he began, not just because we're celebrating our future. He paused, looked around the room, then, but because it's about recognizing the journey that brought us here. Something about the way he said that felt deliberate. Every person in this room has played a role in shaping our lives, he continued, some more than others. His eyes moved, slowly, carefully, until they landed on me. There it was. A subtle shift rippled through the crowd. People followed his gaze. And just like that, the spotlight returned. She noticed it too. Her body tensed, just slightly. Her smile tightened, because now she knew where this was going. I think it's important, he said, voice smooth, controlled, to acknowledge the past so we can truly appreciate the present. The words sounded harmless, but the intent behind them wasn't. A few guests exchanged glances. The atmosphere sharpened again. And sometimes, he added, the past shows us exactly what we don't want. There it was, clear enough now. A few quiet laughs, uncomfortable, but present. He took a step forward, still looking at me. Wouldn't you agree? The room held its breath. For a second, I said nothing. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because timing matters. Then I set the untouched glass down, straightened slightly, and stepped forward. If the past teaches anything, I said calmly, it's clarity. His smile didn't move. Exactly. I nodded once. And clarity shows you the difference between what looks valuable, a pause, and what actually is. The shift was immediate, subtle, but undeniable. A few people stopped smiling. Others leaned in slightly. Because now, this wasn't just a speech anymore. It was a conversation. And it wasn't going the way he expected. He let out a short breath, still composed, still controlled. Interesting perspective, he said. But I think we can all agree. He raised his glass slightly higher. That outcomes speak louder than intentions. I held his gaze, then glanced briefly toward the marina, toward the yacht, then back. Sometimes, I said, outcomes aren't what they seem. That landed, harder than anything before. Because now, Even the people who didn't understand the history felt the tension. And she looked between us, not smiling anymore, not playing the role, because whatever she had planned, it was no longer under control. The older man beside me murmured quietly, "Now this is interesting." But for me, this wasn't about winning a moment or proving a point. It was about something else. Something I had noticed the second I walked in. Something no one else had questioned yet. Because while everyone was focused on appearances, on wealth, on status, they missed the one thing that didn't fit. And now it was time to bring it into the light. I looked directly at her, not at him, not at the crowd, just her, and asked one simple question. "When did you decide to lie to everyone here?" The silence that followed was different from all the others. This one, the question didn't echo. It didn't need to. It landed exactly where it was meant to. Her expression froze, not dramatically, just enough of the truth to slip through before she could stop it. "What are you talking about?" she asked. But the confidence from earlier was gone, replaced with something tighter, more careful. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let the silence stretch, because now everyone was paying attention. Her fiancé stepped forward again, faster this time, more direct. "That's enough," he said, firm, controlled. But underneath that control, there was pressure. I turned slightly toward him. "Is it?" His jaw tightened. "This isn't the place for whatever you think you're doing." "You're right," I said calmly. "It's not." A small pause, which is exactly why I'm asking now. A ripple moved through the room, guests shifting, whispers returning, because now this wasn't subtle anymore. She stepped in quickly, trying to regain control. "Stop," she said, lowering her voice. "Whatever this is, you're misunderstanding." "I'm not," I interrupted, still calm, still steady. That's what made it worse. Her eyes searched mine, looking for hesitation, for uncertainty, for anything she could use to push back. She didn't find it. "Then explain," she said, and just like that, she made the mistake, because now she had invited the truth. I nodded once, then reached into my jacket, slowly, deliberately, not for effect, but for clarity. A few people leaned forward instinctively, anticipation sharpening. I pulled out a single folded document, nothing dramatic, just paper. "You sent me this invitation 3 weeks ago," I said, holding it lightly, but that's not the part that stood out. Her fiancé frowned slightly, watching closely now. "It was the date," I continued. "The timing." A pause, just long enough for curiosity to build. Because according to public records, I glanced briefly at him, then back at her. "Your engagement was finalized 5 months ago." Silence. Not the kind that fades, the kind that locks a room in place. A few heads turned, fast, toward him. He didn't react immediately, but the stillness in his posture gave everything away. "That's not unusual," someone muttered quietly. "People announce things late all the time." "True," I nodded, "but announcements don't usually come with revised agreements." Now, the tension sharpened. Her voice came out tighter. "You don't know what you're talking about." I met her gaze. "No." I unfolded the paper, carefully. "This isn't just an invitation," I said. "It's a cover." Her fiancé stepped forward again, anger slipping through now. "Watch your words." But I didn't look at him. Not yet. Instead, I kept my eyes on her, because this was always about her. "The venue," I continued, "the guest list." A small pause. "The timing." I lowered the paper slightly. "This isn't an engagement party." Another pause, heavier this time. "It's a confirmation." A murmur spread instantly. Confusion, unease, questions forming faster than answers. "A confirmation of what?" someone asked. I finally turned toward him. Her fiancé studied him for a moment, then said it. "Of control." The word hit differently, because it didn't sound like an accusation. It sounded like a fact. That's ridiculous, he snapped. Too fast. Too sharp. Is it? I replied. Now I stepped forward, closing the distance slightly, not aggressively, but enough to shift the space between us. 5 months ago, I said, you didn't just get engaged. I looked around the room, at the guests, at the witnesses. You signed a merger. The reaction was immediate, whispers rising, names being exchanged, pieces connecting. Her face had changed completely now. No more performance, no more control, just exposure. This party, I continued, it's not about love. I turned back to her. It's about making it look like it is. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Her fiancé laughed suddenly, but it wasn't natural. It was forced. Control damage. You're reaching, he said, trying to create drama where there is none. Then prove me wrong. The words came out simple. Clean. And that's when it happened. That small hesitation. That fraction of a second where he didn't speak. In a room like this, that's all it takes. Because powerful people don't hesitate, unless there's something to hide. The older man beside me exhaled slowly, almost impressed. Guests began looking at each other differently now, not as attendees, but as witnesses. And she looked at him, not at me, because now the question wasn't what I knew. It was what she had agreed to. You said she started, then stopped. Too late. The room caught it. He turned to her quickly, voice lower now. Not here. But it was already here. Everything was. I stepped back slightly, not pushing further. Not yet, because the truth had already entered the room. And once it does, it doesn't leave quietly. I looked at her one last time. You didn't invite me to humiliate me, I said softly. A pause. You invited me because you needed a witness. Her eyes widened, just slightly, because deep down, she knew that part was true. And now, so did everyone else. No one spoke, not because they didn't have questions, but because they finally understood something was very wrong. The music had stopped completely now. Even the staff stood still, unsure whether to continue or disappear, because this was no longer an event. It was a reveal. She slowly stepped away from him, not dramatically, not in anger, but in realization. You told me it was just a formality, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but in that silence, it carried everywhere. His expression hardened. It is, he replied, too quickly, too controlled. No, she shook her head slightly. You said this was ours. There it was. Not love, ownership. A few guests began stepping back, creating distance, because now this wasn't social anymore. It was personal and very real. I didn't move, didn't interrupt, because this part was never mine to control. He stepped closer to her, lowering his voice. You're overreacting. But she didn't step back. Not this time. Am I? She asked quietly. Or did I just finally listen? Silence again, but different now, stronger, because it wasn't uncertainty anymore. It was clarity. He glanced around the room, noticing the eyes, the judgment, the shift. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Everyone, he said, forcing a smile, I think we've had enough misunderstandings for one night. No, she interrupted, and that one word changed everything, because she had never interrupted him before. I want the truth, she said, looking directly at him now. No more versions, no more timing, no more control. He exhaled slowly, the calm mask slipping, just slightly. This isn't the place. You made it the place. Another silence. And then he stopped pretending. It's business, he said flatly. The room reacted instantly. Some gasped, others turned away, because hearing it out loud made it real. A merger benefits both sides, he continued. You knew that. I knew parts of it, she replied. Not all of it. That's how deals work. The word deal echoed louder than anything else that night. She looked at him for a long second, then nodded slowly, not in agreement, in understanding. Then you should have married someone who wanted a deal. And just like that, she stepped back, out of his reach, out of his plan. The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to, because everyone felt it. The collapse. Not loud, not chaotic, just complete. He looked at her, then at the guests, then briefly at me, trying to calculate something, trying to recover control. But there was nothing left control. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. She gave a small, almost sad smile. "No," she replied. "I already made one." And for the first time that night, she looked at me again, not with regret, not with pride, but with something honest. "Now I'm fixing it." I didn't respond, didn't step forward, didn't step back, because this moment wasn't about me proving anything. It never was. The older man beside me let out a quiet breath. "Well," he murmured, "that's a first." Guests began to move again, slowly, carefully, like people leaving a storm they didn't expect to witness. Some avoided eye contact. Others gave quiet nods. Respect this time, not curiosity. He, her now former fiancé, walked away without another word. No scene, no argument, just exit. Because even he knew it was over. And just like that, the performance ended. She stood there for a moment, alone, but not lost. Then she walked toward me, each step steady, each second quieter than the last. When she finally stopped in front of me, there were no dramatic pauses left, no hidden meanings, just truth. "I didn't invite you to hurt you," she said. "I know," I replied. She hesitated. Then, "I invited you because you were the only person who ever saw through me." That landed differently. "Even when I didn't want you to," she added. I studied her for a moment, not the past version, not the memory, the person standing here now. "And now," I asked. She exhaled softly. "Now I finally see what you saw." A pause, and what I walked away from. There it was, full circle. I nodded once, not in victory, not in forgiveness, just acknowledgement. Because some things don't need to be reopened to be understood. Outside, the water reflected the city lights, calm, unbothered. The yacht still stood there, silent, unchanged, a symbol of everything that had shifted, without ever needing to announce itself. She glanced toward it, then back at me. "You really built all of that?" she asked. "Yes." Another pause. "I'm glad," she said quietly. And for the first time, it didn't sound like regret. It sounded like acceptance. I gave a small nod, then stepped past her. Not dramatically, not coldly, just forward. Because some chapters close without needing a return. As I walked out, the night air felt different, lighter, clearer. Not because I proved anything, but because I didn't need to anymore. Behind me, the noise of the party had faded into something distant, something irrelevant. Ahead was everything I had built, everything I had become. And none of it had anything to do with her choosing me. Because in the end, the loudest silence in that room wasn't my arrival. It was the moment everyone realized I was never the one who lost.